Hiring on the railroad. It was a Sunday night in late March 1977, and I was filling out my last unemployment card for my last unemployment check on my last unemployment extension when the phone rang. It was a lady from the Burlington Northern Railroad offering me a job as a section worker, a gandy dancer. Section work is hard labor, pounding spikes with a spike maul and lifting creosote railroad ties. The job entailed helping to build and repair railroad tracks, considered back-breaking work by most. I reported the next day to the third floor of Seattle's King Street Station for formalities and paperwork. The following day I reported for a company physical, and by midweek I was working on the railroad at Interbay Balmer Yard in Seattle, Washington, with 60 other young men, a few of them being freshly paroled from state prisons. That summer was the hottest summer on record up till that time, as the temperatures reached over 100 degrees several days in a row. I made a few friends at work and kept track of every worker I hired out with. During the first few weeks, I saw guys quit, disappear, and walk off the job almost every day for one reason or another. The main reason that people left was that it was very hard labor. There were men who showed up every day who had to be told everything over and over again. Some of them were challenged or slow, or back then they were called retarded. And there were others not retarded but who would play a game to get out of work, what we called weasels. I worked with a Weasley parolee who would pick up railroad ties by himself and do a weightlifting routine with them, but had to be instructed over and over to do anything else. If you were still working after 60 days, you joined the union, at which point it would take a federal case to get rid of you. On the 59th day, Foreman Vern came out to the property and handed paperwork to several of my co-workers. The paperwork informed the workers that they were no longer employed by the railroad due to a lack of initiative. The weasels were let go, and the retarded fellows who had shown up every day and worked hard remained. We were now down to about 30 of the original 60, and we were becoming a productive workforce. One day we all stepped back in time when the job site became a scene out of Johnny Cash's hit song, Legend of John Henry's Hammer. If you haven't heard it, the song is about an incredibly strong black man who worked the section on the railroad decades earlier, pounding spikes like no other. There were a couple old black guys on our crew who were about to find out could swing a hammer just as well as the mythical John Henry. Mac, an old black man operating a bulldozer, got off his machine, and the section foreman, Mitch, joined him to put on a show for about 10 minutes. "We're going to show you boys how it's done," they hollered at us and told us to get out of the way, and positioned about 20 spikes each in the tie plate holes. The old gandy dancers had 2 spike mauls, one in each hand, and they hammered in the spikes with alternating strikes as they moved down the line of ties, swinging one arm after the other. They sort of looked like windmills. A machine could not have done it better. When finished, Matt got up onto his bulldozer and Mitch went back to supervising, while the rest of us struggled along in awe at a much inferior pace than the impressive feat we had just witnessed. While pounding spikes, I would see the trains go by with the switchman riding the shove of boxcars. One was a split tail, and the brakeman waving from the cupolas of cabooses. I could only dream of the job of a passenger train conductor as the silver streak blew by. I decided I would not rest until I became an Amtrak passenger train conductor. Every Friday after work, I would go see Connie, the well-preserved employment lady, and try to find myself a position as a switchman. She would ask if I was willing to work weekends, nights, out of town, holidays, and short calls. I would answer yes to all of her questions, give her a smile, and go back pounding spikes. In the fall, I was bumped out of Seattle and laid off. I worked for 7 months on the section and kept track of every man I hired on with. One by one, they quit, got fired, or were injured. After 20 years, there was only 2 of the original 60 I hired out with left, the 2 of us that became conductors. My friend Kenny making 30 years and myself 40 years. In late November, Connie from the employment office called me up to offer me the trainman job, and I jumped on it.